Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. So the seasonal story for the Season of the Plunder has ended. I'll have my thoughts on where the narrative of the game generally is in a video later, but for the moment I wanted to talk about what happened in the last weeks of the seasonal story. In particular, I wanted to talk about what happened with Eramis, given that after her conflict with Mithrax, her place in the world of Destiny is left somewhat adrift. The major question asked of the Eliksni characters in this season's story ended up being about what defined them as a civilization, and whether they allowed the past to define their future. Eramis's place in that story is one that's going to easily generate a great degree of conflict, both currently and in the future, and that conflict all arises from her and other characters being unable to let go of the past. This is the big driver of the seasonal story. But where does it all really begin? I think these threads started to make themselves clear from the beginning, but I feel like it's spelled out for us in several of the conversations in week 6, 7, and 8 of the seasonal story. I think it's in this moment after Mithrax's major secret was revealed that there was a tipping point in the conflict, and everyone, including Ido and Eramis most crucially, started to tip their hands as far as showing what they believed the future of the Fallen was going to be. And I think, of all, there is a major catalyst for Eramis's changes in those last couple of weeks, and that catalyst is Ido. Ido, of course, started communications with Eramis in week 5, and the two of them ended up communicating back and forth several times. It's these moments that really allowed the two of them to reveal where the great schism of the Eliksni lay, and it gave us valuable information about where both of them stood. I'm going to let some of the audio play week by week and just explain the perspective positions for the Eliksni. To be clear, you have two sides to this idea, two sides arguing where the future of the Fallen really lies, but it's arguing about a lot more than that. It's really arguing about what freedom means to the Eliksni, and how that impacts their future is important as well. I think that it's really succinctly summarized in 3 bits of dialogue. One of them is a conversation between the Drifter and Ido. The other is Ido's message to Eramis, and the final one is the log that Ido was making, which was interrupted by Eramis halfway through. Let's take a listen to all of them. First of all, here's that conversation between the Drifter and Ido.
I wanted to speak with you, Jermaine.
Whoa! What kind of books you been reading? It's been Drifter for a long while now.
Drifter, then. You have kept secrets from us since the beginning. It is unkind to withhold knowledge.
Unkindness was never my aim. Apologies, sister.
Accepted. Do you have any insight as to why the Lucent Hive are interested in the relics?
Power is freedom, and everybody's chasing it, from the biggest freaky moth monster to the lowest space pirate.
But while the Lucent Hive are loyal to Savathun, the pirates enjoy a startling degree of freedom already. They are not constrained by office or honor. They are ruled only by their own desires.
Yeah, it might look that way from the outside, but they've got to fight for everything they get. That's just survival. A meal and a bed that don't come at the end of a blade? That's freedom.
You are drawing a comparison.
Me? Look, I get it. Walking away from folks can feel like freedom. If no one's relying on you, there's no one to disappoint. No one to be disappointed by.
Now you are speaking of Mithrax. I do not judge him for who he was, but he treated me like a hatchling.
Can't really blame him for not wanting to discuss it. Shame's a hard thing to shake. Harder if you have to share it.
You are saying I should forgive him.
That's your call, sister. I'm just saying, I get it.
Eramis seeks freedom for our people, but her freedom is vengeful. She wishes to be free from her shame. She will sacrifice Elixni lives in its pursuit, and it will never end. Thank you, Drifter.
You know, I don't hear that enough.
This first conversation really tells us what the core of the struggle looks like. It lays bare the foundations of the very struggle for the soul of the Elixni. Both the House of Salvation and the House of Light are trying to attain freedom of some kind, but what that freedom looks like depends on who you are. It's struggling for the future of the Elixni, but in one instance that future only goes so far as tomorrow. The ability to survive another day is what House Salvation looks like. The way that the Whirlwind has influenced Eramis has completely and utterly defined her worldview, and has made her brutal along with all of her pirate kin. She has very much embraced the idea that, well, freedom is this ability to survive. Freedom from one's enemies is what freedom ultimately looks like. But this is a pathway to endless violence, is the ultimate argument of Eido on the other side. And this runs, of course, in contrary to the ideas of the House of Light, who have this conception of the idea of freedom as what the Drifter defines it as. The ability to find freedom is found without, not within. It's having a community that provides for your safety and allows you to live freely. It's looking forward to building that community, and it's providing a place for everyone, allowing everyone to sleep well at night without the fear of their throats being slit. It is more than simply looking towards tomorrow, it is looking beyond tomorrow towards the next generations. And most importantly of all, it isn't looking at the past and having that past define the future entirely. It acknowledges and respects the past, just as Eido does, but it's not something that allows it to completely own and dominate what the future might be. Eido and Eramis basically give these conflicting views of the Elixni's state of being to each other as they communicate. Of course, Eido is the one that is filled with a hopeful vision of community and building together, and allowing everyone to share in that future freedom, whereas Eramis has a much more haunted view, one that is defined by the Whirlwind and by suffering and by conflict. As they communicate through the semaphore signals each week, they reveal that to each other, and yeah, take a listen to each of them. Notice again, you will definitely and clearly see what I mean when I describe each of those two competing ideas.
Eramis Kell, I greet you in the light. I wish that you could greet me in the same. You told my father that we need not be enemies. This is still true. But we will always be your enemy if you serve the Witness. I do not know what it has promised you. An Elixni reborn, a Reese restored. Did it promise us a future? But I ask, do you strive for our future? Or do you flee the Whirlwind? The Lucent Hive and the Witness both pose a great threat to the Elixni. But there is no greater threat to us than when we fight against each other. This division will destroy us completely. You remember the Whirlwind. I do not. But I believe that the greatest treasure we lost was unity. I called for our parley because you believe this too. You will say that House Salvation will bring unity through the destruction of our enemies. But that path does not end Eramis Kell. You will never find what you are seeking. You will never undo the legacy of the Whirlwind. Eido of the House of Light, Scribe Log Zeta 78D. At this point in the Guardian's adventures, we have had contact with a great many pirates. Each crew has a unique composition and pledges loyalty to the most powerful among their numbers. They fight for whomever promises them the most power, or the most glimmer. They adopt whatever code of honor befits them and concern themselves with little beyond the present. A friend told me that these pirates are not as free as they seem, that their lives are fueled by desperation more than their own desires. But there is still the call of the open stars. These pirates sought to possess the relics of Nezarec. What else might they hold?
Scribe Eido.
Eramis Kell? I greet you in the light.
You are young and honor the old ways. So I will speak gently. You say there are paths that never end. But these are also paths you cannot turn away from. Mithrax thinks he can. He is wrong. He and I will always be what we are. But we are not something you would wish to become. I remember the whirlwind, and we are running from it. We are running from that pain, and will be forever. You do not want this life. Aramis. Do not stand in my way. If we meet again, I will be the last thing you see. You and that hypocrite you call a father.
Ultimately, the positioning of Aramis, Eido, and Mithrax well defines the nature of the Eliksni and their current stratification. They are made up of all sorts of different groups of people, be they of different ages, different beliefs, different aspirations, and different life experiences that have all led them to their different viewpoints. Eido and Mithrax both have parts of Aramis within them in a certain way, with Mithrax having her penchant for brutality thanks to his past, and Eido having her respect for the old ways, as her way as a scribe has taught her. Eido, however, is a representation of the future, and it's something that both Aramis and Mithrax see potential within. It's part of the reason why what happened in the final week of the seasonal story happened. And also, more importantly than all of that, it's part of the reason why Mithrax is hoping simply to let her build the future. It's why when people talk about the future of the Eliksni, they don't talk about Mithrax and the founding of House Light. He certainly doesn't. He talks about Eido instead. But, in that same sense, Aramis is openly defined by the past. She is ancient in Fallen terms and has clearly lived for well over 1,000 years at this point, if the estimates of the good Sir Myling Games are to be believed, which I personally think they should be. Even if you estimate that the time of the Dark Ages and the City Ages only lasted a few hundred years, it's very likely that Aramis was around for well over 1,000 years, experiencing not only the whole of the Whirlwind and the Fall of Rhys, but also the long drift, the calamitous time of exodus that the Eliksni had to endure, which adequately turned them into the Fallen and gave them those pirate ways that she now knows so well. Mithrax is the bridging point between all of this, and you can see both perspectives joined in him. You see within him not only the brutality of those old pirate ways, but also the willingness to turn away from them, and the strength required and the conviction required to plot a new course. This is so important, because without that strength and conviction, I don't think Eido would be who she is today. In a strange way, Mithrax has seen the true potential of darkness, just in the same way that Aramis has, but I feel as though he represents that split within the Eliksni, where he no longer believes in that message of a future that lives only as long as tomorrow. He doesn't believe in the necessity of brutality anymore, and it's certainly what he's imparted on Eido. She is now the future of that message, and after Aramis's defeat in the final week of the seasonal story, the things have changed. Here's a quick recap of everything that happened, replaying the key moments from that story mission, where Eido went to retrieve the last of those artifacts, the Tombs of Nezarec. This is what happened.
Guardian, this layer is swarming with the Lucent Hive. We must not abandon caution now that our mission comes to a close.
Your presence is not necessary.
Eido, what are you doing here? Are you unharmed?
I will retrieve the last relic myself, without violence. The Hive.
Eido, Guardian, find her, please. She is my light.
I believe I am close to the relic. When we have it, Aramis Kell will see the futility of her actions.
You risk yourself for her. She will never abandon her ways.
No, you both must face the past. You cannot outrun it. You cannot hide it from me.
Eido, please, forgive me.
No! The door is sealed! Father!
Do it. Show your daughter who you really are. She could have had everything.
The conclusion of the seasonal story with Eramis's defeat prompted Eido to send the Kell of House Salvation one final message. This message is an ultimatum of sorts. It's a kind of checkmate to prove her correctness as far as the argument that the two of them have been representing is concerned. And in a certain way, it lays bare something terrifying to Eramis. The idea that she is too far gone. It's something that realistically proves Eido's bravery. Take a listen really quickly to what Eido sent Eramis.
Eramis Kell, again, I greet you in the light. Not as my enemy, but as my savior. You protected me from the Lucent Hive. Without your intervention, I would have died at their hands. I thank you. I was terrified. Not only of the Hive, but of you. When you arrived, I thought it was to follow through on your threat. Then you turned and raised your blade against my assailants. But that same blade would have taken the life of my father if you'd had the advantage. I am not afraid of what you are, but I am afraid of what you do. The whirlwind led to you. It led to my father, but it led to me as well. We can see a future for the Eliksni beyond the pain of the whirlwind. But you think you can't be a part of it. I do not believe that. My father spared you because he saw that you could turn from a path he had once followed. I see this also. I know the futility of this, but I will say it regardless. There is a place for you here. We need not be enemies. Come home, Eramis. May the light provide.
This is an open rebuke. Telling Eramis to come home is akin to asking her to come in from the cold. It is an off-ramp from her ways of barbarism and piracy. It is an acceptance of the idea that she is not correct about the nature of the Eliksni's future and what it must be. Eido has won this debate, and therefore she has invited Eramis into the city, with the consciousness and the belief that her convictions are true and that she will stick by them, because she genuinely does believe that a future for the Eliksni has to be for all the Eliksni, because she knows that as long as there are people out there who still stick to this old way, the vision is incomplete. Only up until the point at which everyone realizes that they can beat their swords into plowshares will there truly be peace. Eramis, however, tragically, upon receiving this message, is unswayed, but perhaps is still deeply affected. She does not share Eido's belief, not because of some lasting conviction of her own, but because of a terrible realization that the future that Eido speaks of, the one that the rest of the Eliksni will share in, is one that she cannot. It's summarized in the last lore book of the Semaphore Signals, and it reads as follows. Here always. The console went dark. The message had ended. Eramis knew there would not be another. Come home, Eramis. Eramis closed her eyes. The words settled into the Kell's thoughts. They were heavy, sharp. She felt herself bleed with them. She had begged for death in the moment that Mithrax's blades were at her throat, and his mercy was a deeper wound than any. Eramis remembered her home. Her home was Rhys, devastated by the Great Machine. Her home was Arthas, her mate, sleeping in a ship long since departed from this system. Her home was her hatchlings, at her mate's side. Aramis remembered watching them grow and molt, how they had chittered their delight, and looked to her with their wide, luminous eyes. She would give her house to see those eyes again, but the brightness she had seen in Ido's eyes was a wide, blinding terror, not only of the hive, of her. Come home, Aramis. Aramis lived. She lived, and she knew what the Eliksni had lost. The dream of a new Rhys was delicate and beautiful. Aramis had held it in her hands, close to her chest for so long. She knew now that she had smothered it. In all her violence, in all the death that followed her, she had curled her hands into fists. The dream of a new Rhys would have died with Ido if she had been left to the hive and their putrid light. But Ido did not know Rhys, neither did her father. They could look beyond that loss. Come home, Aramis. Aramis knew that she would never see anything but terror in another's eyes. Aramis knew that the Eliksni would find a new home with Ido. Aramis knew that there was no place for her in it. Aramis acknowledges here in the end that Ido's vision for the future of the Eliksni, a future free from pain and barbarism, is the future that the Eliksni should have. It is the dream now of a new Rhys that she lost and killed. But she also knows that she, in her own way, is correct. There are indeed pathways to truth, pathways that never end. But pathways sometimes cannot be stepped away from. She is on one such path, thanks to the past that she has experienced, the pain that she has wrought, and the pain that she has been dealt. She knows that it is too late for herself, and she knows that the pathway she has trodden on is not only one that is incorrect and has failed her, but she has wandered too far along it to ever leave it. Perhaps it's not too late for some kind of redemption. Ido and potentially Mithrax would certainly welcome Aramis into the house if she was looking for such an instance of redemption. But it's not clear if Aramis would ever seek it. Maybe in a moment she would look to do as much good for the Eliksni as possible. Maybe there is some heroic sacrifice in her future. But otherwise the Kell of Salvation is still there, tied to the past in a way that Mithrax and Ido still cannot be. Perhaps she will one day learn from Mithrax's lesson and put the past to sleep. But for the moment, Aramis remains bound to that path. And within that pain, there is something for the witness to continue to exploit. But I don't think her story ends here. And I don't think for a second that the story of the Eliksni is anything close to done. It is soon to be time for them to chart their own future. Whether that future is within the light or the darkness remains to be seen. Whether that future lasts only until the next rising sun or until the next rising generation is also still to be seen. But that's all from me for now. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, go ahead and leave a like. And let me know what you think down below in the comments section. Tell me what you thought of the different story beats of the seasonal story. Personally, I really wish we could have seen more of the Nezarec story beat. You know, if there is an end of season event, it's not impossible that we could see that. But more importantly, let me know what you think is going to be the future for the Eliksni. I personally am still on my train of Ido may one day become the Kell of Kells, but maybe that's just me. Of course, all of that can be left down below in the comments section. And if you want more Destiny lore content, go ahead and hit subscribe, and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership is quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Bife. Per Audacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.